Okay. Okay, folks, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and sorry for the short delay. We're still getting used to this type of platform. Can everybody hear us out there okay? We're all good? Thank you. Thumbs up. That's great. So welcome, and thank you for joining in tonight. And I've been wearing my mask, even though we're social distance in Nelson at our council. Council's all at home, and we have a couple of staff people here. Sarah's here to help me out and to manage the tech side of things as well. She's our corporate officer, and Kevin Cormack is in his office, as in Colin McClure. So we have enough backup here to help us out this evening. I just want to encourage everybody, when you're out and about, please wear your mask when you keep yourself safe, keep our community safe, be kind to each other, wash your hands. And with that, I'd like to start off with the Aboriginal Acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered as a traditional territory of the Kootenay, the Seleks and the Senex peoples, and is home to Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honour their connection to the land, the rivers, and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. And with that, I'd like to know if there are any late items. I don't think so. So a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Councillor Lochtenberg and Councillor Woodward moved and seconded. I got it here, John. I got it here. Woodward, Lochtenberg. Questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. Next up is the adoption of the minutes of the October 26th Committee of the Whole, November 23rd Committee of the Whole. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Renwick, Councillor Page. Questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, the next part of the meeting is public participation. And we have a total of 15 minutes, and we hold people to their times. We have a total of 15. That doesn't mean that each group gets 15. So I'll just read out the outline of our regulations around participation from the public at our meetings. We understand it's a little different now through Zoom, so we'll do our best to manage it the best way we possibly can. City Council welcomes comments from the public on issues it's dealing with or other issues of interest to the public. Before speaking, please state your name, area of residence, city or region. Comments from the public will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes, and Sarah will be timing you. This is not a forum for complaints, which are dealt with by staff through established complaint procedures. Council will not make any decision at this meeting about the matter that you raise, but may refer the matter to staff for follow-up. Speakers must not address topics that relate to matters from which public hearings have been held prior to Council's consideration on the matter of adoption of a bylaw. So if we've had a public hearing and we haven't adopted the bylaw, we can't hear any comments in between. Speakers shall address all comments through the chair, that's the mayor, or presiding member of council. Okay, everybody got that? And with that, our first stop is Fridays for the Future. Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry.
Steve Ethier has would like to participate in the public participation portion.
Okay, is Steve there somewhere?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Steve. So one other thing I wanted to mention to everybody that's on the Zoom, I don't see everybody on the screen, so I'm not sure who has their hand up or who hasn't, but just bear with me. We will get to you. So Steve, you're the first one on the agenda. I'm sorry. You're phoning in, and off you go. Let us know who you are, where you live, and what you want to speak to.
Yeah, my name's Steve Etier. I live in the city of Nelson, and I'm just wanted to speak to the food cycle program and the equipment that's potentially being purchased. I do have a few concerns with some of the numbers that were stated in the pilot, and then in one of the articles that was just posted, I think last week. Anyway, the pilot study kind of, on the surface, the numbers seem like they're representative. But once you start digging through the study a little bit, you realize that the majority of the users in the pilot were probably like-minded people and people who were wanting to use the equipment. And so I feel that there's a little bit of a bias there, and that should probably be weighted in the numbers somehow. I realized that they issued another 30 more to food cyclers to random users, and I'm wondering how is random done? Does the person still need to buy the equipment? Because if so, to me that's not random, because they're still kind of in it to win it in a sense. So I'd like to see that weighted in the pilot. The other thing is the greenhouse gas emissions. I'm not sure. On the surface, the numbers used to calculate greenhouse gas emissions, they calculate total cost savings, seem to assume full buy-in from the population. So it assumes that every single person or household is going to use this equipment. And I just don't see that happening. I think there should be a risk factor calculated and weighted into the numbers. Assume 15 to 20% of the population won't use it right off the get-go. And then this brings me to the next point, which is policing. So if policing the food cycler, and the composting.
You got time.
Okay, and if the expectation is to use the food cycler and dry all of the waste product before putting into the compost bin, what happens when that moisture level isn't reached in the compost bin? Does that mean people need to start being fined or left stickers like we do on garbage bags? So who takes care of that? Has the administrative cost been calculated into the pilot or into the numbers, the annual fee? And then also the staff time needed to hand out the tickets or the fines or the stickers on the compost bins. Life cycle cost, that doesn't seem to be really accounted for. We have to assume that the equipment, that type of appliance, won't last longer than more than 5 to maybe 8 years. So we need to account for the recycling greenhouse gas emissions. How much does it take to actually dispose of the equipment? And then purchase new equipment to replace it. So that needs to be accounted for. Next is in the grant. So it does state that there's an expectation or a potential for grant funding, 2/3 grant funding. And most grants, and I read through the Clean BC grant, and it does seem like it needs to be tied to a real property or a tangible asset. This is just an appliance that sits on the countertop. I can't see this actually applying to a grant or being successful in the grant application.
Okay, Steve.
To me, it's still...
Steve, thank you. You've had your 3 minutes, and thank you so much for. I think I listed about 6 questions that you had, and if you don't mind, could you please put those on paper and bring them in to us, and we'll do our very best to answer those questions for you. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine. Actually,
Okay.
Sarah was nice enough to respond back to me with some of the answers, and I just haven't had a chance to read it.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. So, so
Mr.
we'll get.
Mayor.
Oh, sorry, Kevin. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just quickly answer the one on the random sample. It was at no cost to the participant, so they were lent to the participants. If they didn't want to purchase it at the end, they didn't have to purchase it at the end, and it was truly random. It was taken from our garbage billing, and
Fridays for the future.
yeah, so it was I forget how many, it was every 50th person or whatever was selected, so it was a true random sample.
Thanks, Kevin. So we'll get back to you on each one of those, Steve, and if you don't feel comfortable with the answers, by all means, you're more than welcome to continue your pursuit of getting maybe not the answer you want, but the answer that we've got anyway. So, all right?
Sure, I'm all for the composting project, so don't worry about that.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, that's
Okay.
all. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks a lot,
Okay,
Steve.
bye.
Take care. Okay, up next is Fridays for the Future, and I think is it Liam that I see there?
Lynn. Sorry,
It's a little hard to read.
my understanding is that we're a delegation, and so we were registered for a 10-minute time slot.
That's correct. No, that's correct.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
great.
It's that piece that we just had, Liam, is the public piece. So, yeah.
Okay, so I'll set the screen share. And Waka is also presenting with me.
Hello, hello.
Okay.
We don't have his presentation, do we? Yeah. So, Liam, just for interest, you know, in the future, and I'm sure we'll see you again, it would be really helpful if you could supply us with your presentation. We have it?
I believe we sent it to Gabriel.
Good. Okay. Are we going to pull it up here tonight, Sarah? Okay, thank you, thank you.
Lynn, are you working to share your screen?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
The present, yeah, I have the.
I can do the screen share, Lynn, if that's helpful.
Okay, you can do the screen share?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Oh, yeah, we got it now. Good, thank you. Thank you.
You're
Thank
very
you,
welcome.
Waka.
My pleasure.
Great.
All right. My name is Wahia Aon,
And my name's Lynn.
and we're members of Fridays for Future. We're here today to present the Stop Ecocide campaign, and we're very grateful that you've taken the time to listen to us today. This is a definition of ecocide as submitted to the UN Law Commission by the campaign founder, Polly Higgins. Note the use of the word inhabitants, which shows that it is not just human beings who are affected by crimes of ecocide. Currently, nobody is being held accountable for serious damage being done to the environment. There is no criminal law to prosecute those responsible for gross damage to the environment because it is currently not considered a crime. Instead, the legal duty of a company is to make as much profit for the shareholders as possible, no matter what the cost. And as a result, ecocide has become a normalized part of our societal narrative. Climate ecocide is the exacerbation of climate change by industrial activity, and this leads to negative effects that we're all very aware of, such as Arctic ice melting, sea levels rising, infertile and irradiated soil, ocean acidification, the sixth mass extinction in which 1,000 to 10,000 times the background extinction rate is currently occurring, and of course, as we are all too familiar with here in BC, forest fires. All of these environmental issues are at their root created by ecocide. Our culture facilitates and promotes industrial activity that operates with total disregard for the environment. This is literally the definition of ecocide. Fortunately, however, the precedence has already been set for alternative perspective and behavior. Around the world, several countries have given legal rights to nature. For example, India's Ganga River was granted human rights, as well as the Klamath River in the US. Granting rights to nature is very important, but we also need to take responsibility for those rights. Rights mean absolutely nothing if there's no criminal law in place to protect them. For example, your basic human right to life means very little without a criminal law against murder. Your right is protected by criminal law, and if somebody infringes or attempts to infringe, they can be prosecuted by the state. An example on the international level is the criminal law against genocide. People are not allowed to commit mass murder. It is a criminal law that is upheld internationally. But currently, no international law exists that protects the rights of nature. What we're proposing is that nature's rights need to be protected by the international criminal law of ecocide. This will protect the right to life of nature and all life forms. I'm going to pass this off to Lynn.
Okay, thanks. And I'll be quick with this part of the presentation, but the slide that you should see is a simple pyramid of the different types of law. So at the bottom, there's soft law, and this is voluntary and relies on goodwill. And a good example of this is the Paris Climate Agreement, where countries have agreed to climate targets, but there are no consequences for failing them, other than catastrophic global warming. So most environmental regulations in Canada currently fall under civil law. In order to stop environmental destruction, individuals must take defending corporations to court. This is a lengthy and costly process, and large corporations have lots of power, money, and lawyers. So justice can easily be avoided. Large corporations even build the costs of fines into their budgets. And our environmental justice system is currently functioning on this you can do whatever you want as long as you can pay for it basis. As such, it is clear that we need something to prevent ecocide from happening. The missing link is international criminal law. So criminal law would stop ecocide at its source. It holds CEOs and government ministers individually responsible for acts of ecocide, so they can't hide behind corporate anonymity. In criminal law, you report the crime to the police and the state prosecutes the perpetrators of that crime. So ecocide, this is moving to the next slide, ecocide law is not about putting people in jail, rather it's a preventative measure. So most importantly, ecocides will be harder to commit, banks will not want to fund them, investors will stay away, and government ministers and CEOs will not be able to approve projects that lead to ecocide. And introducing such a law is much easier than you might think. So the Rome Statute is the governing document of the ICC, and it is one of the most powerful legal documents in the world. The International Criminal Court is made up of 123 member states, including Canada. And crimes that exist within the jurisdiction of the ICC are known as crimes against peace or atrocity crimes. And these crimes are currently genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. And so we're asking that the Rome Statute be amended to have a fifth crime against peace, and that would be the crime of ecocide. And any state can propose an amendment to the Rome Statute, and if 2/3 of the members vote in favor, the amendment is approved and cannot be vetoed. And any member state can ratify and enforce the new crime. And UN documents have revealed that ecocide was originally included in the original draft of the Rome Statute. However, it was dropped with no official reason. So there is precedent for it. Now we'll move on to the next slide. When ecocide law is proposed, it will be an incentive for major corporations to turn to more environmentally sustainable practices. The money, people, power, and innovation exists. This movement isn't about putting people out of a job, it's about coming together to create a safer, cleaner, and more integrated future. And I'll pass it back to Wahia. You there, Wahia?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep. Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. So today, humanity faces a very common threat, and we're seeing it in so many different ways, in so many different places globally, and it's the threat of the loss of our home. And we're standing up to face this threat and to do something about it. We are empowering ourselves to create a world based on ecological integrity, justice, and compassion. We are beginning to recognize ourselves as part of nature, not above or separate from it. And steps toward ecocide law are being taken every day. Countless people around the world are demanding a just, livable, and sustainable future, creating a growing wave of change, the likes of which humanity has never seen before. This is a strike that you may remember from September of last year, the Fridays for Future March in Nelson, which drew 2,000 people, or roughly 10% of the Nelson area population. This was just one small strike alongside hundreds of thousands of strikes globally in which millions of people participated. This is huge. People are waking up all across the world, dreaming of a better world and realizing the necessity for the legal protections of the planet that we live on. In November of last year in the Vatican, Pope Francis proposed that sins against ecology be added to the Catholic teachings and that ecocide should be a fifth category of crimes against peace at the international level. In June, France's Citizens' Assembly voted 99% in favor of introducing an ecocide law in France and pushing for it internationally, something which President Macron has endorsed. In July, Greta Thunberg, alongside other well-known youth activists, endorsed the campaign, and Stop Ecocide International has convened an expert panel of international criminal lawyers to draft a legal definition of ecocide. this is the first crucial step to amendment. Stop Ecocide Canada was one of the first international teams founded alongside or outside of the UK, and several other countries have started their own teams. France, Germany, Finland, Portugal, Denmark, Spain, the Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, and the list is literally growing every day. Stop Ecocide Canada was founded in Nelson, BC in July, just 5 months ago, by a Fridays for Future member. And so far, we have met and are collaborating with MPs from 4 of the major political parties, the Liberals, Conservatives, NDP, and Green. And one of our allies in Parliament, MP Jenica Atwin from Fredericton, has happily agreed to sponsor a parliamentary petition for us, which means she presents it to the government and we get an official response on their position. People want change. It's obvious that we're running out of time to take meaningful action. How do you want your life to feel? Are you truly satisfied with the world in its current state? Will you join us in help stabilizing our existential foundations so that we can truly begin to thrive? The only thing standing in the way of where we are today and where we could be is us. We've created opportunities for supporting the Stop Ecocide campaign on many levels. Individuals can register as earth protectors and sign our international petition. Organizations and cities can endorse the campaign, and in our most recent development, the Ecocide Alliance provides an opportunity for parliamentarians within all levels of government to join a growing international team in recognition of the crime ecocide. We will be sending you a follow-up email with more information about this. We truly believe this is one of the most powerful things we can do for the planet. Just imagine for a second, a growing global family of earth protectors, individuals, communities, cities, organizations, businesses, provinces, countries, collectively united behind the implementation of an international law protecting the planet, the ecosystems, and all of their inhabitants, ensuring that the natural world that we all love so deeply is cared for and respected for all that it is and all that it provides. Imagine humanity standing up together to guarantee a livable future for current and future generations to thrive. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this talk. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them, and we'll be sending you more details in email. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. You got in right under the wire. You had that figured out pretty good. Thank you. Okay, next up is the West Kootenay people for racial justice.
John, were we going to take questions or?
Oh, sorry. Did Council have a question? Sorry, I just got the one screen in front of me, the one with the presentation. So sorry. Now I see you. Okay, thank you. So we have 2 hands up: Jesse Woodward and Rick Luchtenberg. Jesse, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rick. Oh, go ahead, Rick. You were first.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Jesse. I want to thank Wahea and Lynn for that. That was really well done, and it was a great explanation. I'd heard this before, and I heard some about Ecocide before, but I thought you did a really nice job of packaging it up and presenting it to us. So thank you for that. Just a question for you. As an example of an Ecocide, an event, like what would be a sample legislation that you can think of currently that's, say, happening in the world right now that might count? It just would help sort of frame it. Like I was thinking of what was happening in Brazil with Bolsonaro and his and the cutting and the fires in Brazil. But do you have an example that you can give us?
That's a really good example, Rick. That's one we use a lot when we're talking about ecocide. Ecocide is being defined as causing very large-scale environmental destruction, and to the point where ecosystems have their ability to function completely compromised. So a really good example of that is just the sheer amount of deforestation going on in Brazil. In a Canadian context, the oil sands in Alberta, something of such magnitude that's really affecting the local ecology, and fracking's another good example of when applied at a large scale in an environment, how it disrupts. So things like this would be banned under an international criminal law. and then we would, as a society, be adapting to use different methods that aren't as big scale and as destructive.
Jesse?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, guys. That was good. It was tight and lots of information. So thank you very much. I think that things that I was thinking about as you were talking was about thresholds. So, you know, where would thresholds be for the use of natural resources versus the abuse of natural resources? So I think there's something interesting there, because of course humanity needs natural resources, but it definitely tips over into abuse. I'm thinking of how the world oceans are fished right now. It's just totally abusive and out of control because it's international waters and there aren't a lot of controls. So I think I would like to hear more about like how would you find those thresholds?
Yeah.
And the other piece too is I've heard, like, say with the oil sands, the insurance companies are seeing it as a very dangerous investment now. So they're actually just pulling back purely economics. And I don't think they're pulling back because they want to be green. They're just like, that's not a good investment. So I think that's an interesting place there too, where the destruction of nature gets to such a point where insurance firms pull back. That feels like a really powerful point to actually go after.
Definitely. Yeah, so I can take this question, and you brought up some really good points. I really appreciate the distinction between the use of natural resources and the abuse of the environment. Ultimately, we need to be able to utilize some form of energy in order to meet human needs, in order to sustain human society, and hopefully in order to allow human society to thrive and to flourish. And there is a recovery, I guess, or there's a level of ability within ecosystems to regenerate themselves. And we need to enmesh ourselves into that system and become a part of the ecosystem and have a give and a take, as opposed to primarily a take and a pollute. So I don't know exactly where that would stand, but there's a lot of literature in the scientific space that could answer all of the varieties of questions that you could generate with that. But ultimately, we just need to develop a sustainable relationship with the environment so that the environment can regenerate, and hopefully so that we can contribute to that regeneration, as opposed to just purely extracting resources and polluting. And could you just remind me what the second point was that you made?
Just about how insurance, I mean, you can't do anything without insurance. So it seems like a really big target to go after, is how do you get insurance companies to not insure abusive destruction of nature?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I actually made a social media post earlier today quoting Jojo Mehta, the founder of the Stop Ecocide campaign. And she was saying that big banks currently fund ecocide, and when questioned as to why they do it, their answer is because it's legal. And so a lot of companies and corporations are behaving in this way simply because they can, and there's no punishment, there's no penalty to destroying ecosystems. And so if this were made an international crime, there would be a legally binding incentive for transition and for people never to even consider behaving in that way. In the process towards the adoption of an ecocide law, the incentive will already be there for people to start changing tactics and changing behaviors. But ultimately, right now, we're seeing in so many different instances, even though ecocide isn't a crime, big banks and corporations are starting to pull out of investment into these destructive aspects of society simply because they can see the writing on the wall that we're destroying the planet. And if they continue to do this, they're not going to be able to make money long term. They're not going to be able to sustain themselves long term because there won't be a planet to host life long term.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson?
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks to both of you so much for this. It's, I think out of all of the presentations we've had, probably in the last 2 years that I've been here, this is sort of one of the most in terms of an intellectual exercise, because when you really start to think of where the boundaries are, And you look at different industries, you start to point to like what is fundamentally destructive, and it's like, well, the auto industry, the aviation industry, most of our agricultural systems, our shipping industry, our manufacturing industry, and these are all things that do have to fundamentally change. And so I think it is really important that we go down that path where industry doesn't see it advantageous anymore in order to be allowed to just pollute because they're allowed to. Some of the work that I was doing earlier in terms of regenerative agriculture and seeing the value in the systems that are really supporting our earth. I fundamentally believe that's the future, but I also see this as like a really interesting intellectual exercise of, how are we going to get how are we going to get this done on an international level when the threads of destruction are across industries across the planet? So thank you.
Councillor Page.
You guys, I really appreciate you guys coming forward and bringing this stuff here. The question, as I was going through your slides, preparing for this meeting and hearing you guys talk again, and having looked at even just some of the aspirational goals from the Fridays for Future and also promises from this council for climate emergencies, et cetera, it occurs to me more and more as we go through these conversations how much, the think globally, act locally piece needs attention. And so my challenge and question to you guys is, within the context of the ecocide and what we're trying to support, a rejuvenated, functioning ecological system, what are some of the local things that we need to be focused on, or you guys have highlighted in terms of action that we can be taking in our own region to support our own consumption? We're a town of 10,000 plus, more during the workday, and there's a lot of resources flowing through the economic commerce of these tables. And I'm wondering, where can we take better action to mitigate our impact on the ecosystem? Either one of you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, like you said, the Stop Ecocide campaign is international, so it's not focused on Nelson, British Columbia, but we still have a part to play in getting this forward, and the Canadian Parliament really has a part to play. So what we really need is just more awareness about the ecocide law that's going to be proposed in the coming years at the International Criminal Court. In terms of your question, I'm going to take off my Stop Ecocide Canada hat and just answer you as Lynn. I really liked a lot of the stuff that was in the draft report of the city's climate mitigation adaptation plan. And from my experience and from my area of things, transportation is really key, rethinking how we do transportation inside the cities, how we can have more public transportation and more active transportation, and how we can put pressure on provinces and the federal government also to integrate those systems. So that's a big one for me, and I thought there was a lot of good things about supporting food security and local farmers, and some stuff that the city's already doing in that area is also really good. So
I have something just to shortly add to that quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's difficult to give people a checklist of like things that they can do, like go home and recycle these things and switch out your car for this car. Like there are so many different actions that are very effective subjectively, and it's hard to know what all of them are. So the one thing that I would recommend people to do on an individual level is to just get curious, because this is a very scary situation that we're in globally in terms of the climate crisis, and with the implementation of Stop Ecocide law, which will happen in the coming years, there's going to be a massive amount of change that occurs, but we need to start seeing this as an opportunity, because ultimately the climate crisis and social inequality and all of these other issues that we're facing, it's just feedback within a system based on the current way that we're behaving. And so we need to change our behavior in order to ensure that we can sustain a better world. So getting curious about what you can do as an individual to start making change, getting curious as a counselor or a member of government in, I guess, asking the question of how can we sort of ease the transition into a different type of world that accommodates stop ecocide law? What are the most damaging practices that we as individuals or as a community or as a society are currently sustaining and contributing to? What are the alternatives, and how can I start making small changes every day in order to change massively in the long term and support this creation of a different world and a better future?
Thank you. I've got one suggestion for you, actually. I was a bit disappointed to read in the Nelson Star, I think last week, that the schools were no longer recycling. And the first thing that came to my mind was the students took Fridays off to come down here and protest in front of City Hall. And maybe going forward, they could take Friday to start recycling at the schools. Might be an opportunity. It just seems a shame that the younger people in our community wouldn't be buying into the program of a proper recycling in our school district. So if I had a suggestion for you tonight, that'd be one of them, would be to return back to the schools and see if you couldn't get that program up and running again, because not only would it benefit the students in understanding the value of recycling, but it would definitely have a lot of value for us as a council, because we contribute millions of dollars annually to landfills to try and keep them, bury materials in them that shouldn't be there in the first place. So if you have a few minutes, it might not be a bad idea to go before the school board and have that conversation, and maybe have a Fridays for the Future at LVR and start recycling properly.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, and next up we have West Kootenay People for Racial Justice.
We ready to start?
Yeah.
May I share?
There you
may
go.
I share my screen?
As soon as you start speaking, we can see you. So, thank you very much.
I'll go ahead and share my screen then.
Yeah.
How do I share my screen over there? Okay, see that? Oh. Okay, thank you very much, City Council, for allowing us to present you today. My name is Adjourn. I'm here on behalf of the West People for Racial Justice with my two colleagues, Erica Scott, Randy Jensen.
We're getting a little bit
today.
We're getting a little bit of feedback on your presentation. It was fine.
Yeah.
Up until now, and now it's echoing from your side, I believe.
I might suggest, Selena, you might want to turn your video off while you share.
Yeah, that's correct.
It seems like you don't quite have enough upload bandwidth.
Okay, now I got that.
Just take your time. We're all good. We're all working with this system.
I know. Hold on.
We're pretty fortunate. We happen to have a couple of counselors that know a little bit about this stuff. So
you do sound okay now, though. Maybe it was just a temporary thing.
Yeah.
Okay, because
You sound good now.
Okay, I'll give it a try. Can you hear me there? Okay, now I'll make the screen just a second. Okay, there we go. Can I try again?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're here to discuss with you what we're calling supporting community-led safety initiatives in Nelson. We'd like you to start by envisioning a Nelson that shifts from a reactive and a punitive approach to public safety to a preventative and a caring one. We really feel that this is necessary. We're going to explain to you today why we need this change. There's some evidence of some alternate approaches that are being considered internationally and in Canada. We're going to address what some critics may bring up and why we think those can be responded to. And although we understand that we cannot have a request to City Council today, we're going to explain to you what we will be asking you for. So why do we need this change? As you all know, we have local organizations, many in Nelson, that support people in crises. We have Nelson Mental Health, the Advocacy Center, Nelson Street Outreach, etc. They're all really good organizations, but they're underfunded and they're overextended. They're not able to serve the population in the capacity that they should be doing. For example, Nelson Community Services offers free counseling. But if you're a victim of sexual abuse, you might have to wait up to 1 year to receive that counseling. And as you can imagine, especially as being a woman who's abused, that is inappropriate. We know that many of these counselors do not have enough funding to support victims and perpetrators, and social workers and Nelson Street outreach workers also are paid too little. We also know that the police have to respond to calls that are related to social and mental health issues. We don't have current statistics, although we have asked the Nelson Police Department for them. But what we understand from data that's available from a few years previous, there were at least 1,000 mental health and mental illness, drug and street-related calls that year. And the Nelson Police Department itself, in its report, noted that their staff hours that they used for responding to mental health policing was responsible for the failure in other areas. So we have the police doing work that they're not well trained for and don't really want to be doing, that's occupying a lot of their time. We know that approximately 1 in 5 contacts with police could be related to mental health. And that's pretty deadly because 68% of fatal encounters with law enforcement across Canada had been with people who had mental health issues. There's a lot of evidence and widespread recognition that most and many of these calls would be better dealt with by peers, health, social and community-based programming rather than law enforcement. The police here in Nelson and pretty much across Canada have quite a large budget, much more significant than social services. We understand that the police budget here in Nelson is just over 3.6 million and has been growing annually except for 1 year, and that it comprises approximately 10% of the city's budget. We understand that they've also asked for an additional increase in their budget, and one of the reasons cited is that they need to attend to high needs populations that are attending Nelson. So when you compare that to social services, we know, by example, one of our social services, the Nelson Street Outreach, gets by with about 100,000 a year. So that's, you can imagine, well, as you can see, it's a small percentage compared to the police budget. We don't know of any municipal funding given to any of these organizations. We know that they received approximately 5,000 in their first year only. Social workers who have many years of training make $20 per hour less than a police officer, even though they are more suited and for responding to many of these mental health and social service urgencies. We're the West Kootenay People for Racial Justice, so we need to remind you that there's a lot of bias in policing. We know that Black, Indigenous, and people of color are disproportionately targeted. In street check data, there's higher rates of incarceration. They're overly represented in federal and provincial prisons. Although we don't have local data on street checks, I understand there isn't data that's gathered. We know that there's a current complaint against the Nelson Police Department from a racialized Nelson resident. What is best for the population? We know that it's not the police responding to those with mental health and social issues. We know that there's a coordinated response of all these services to work together would be best. We understand that there was a street cultural collaborative that was piloted back in 2016 and that ended in 2017. And we'd like to know how the outcomes of that collaborative have been incorporated into local service provision. And if there were great outcomes, why they are not continued. We know that sexual assault sexual assault victims do not feel comfortable responding to police. Of those that respond, only 0.23% of them receive justice. They would be much more comfortable responding to a social worker or a nurse. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada calls to action, among other things, say that there has to be adequately funded and accessible Aboriginal specific victim programs and services. We do not feel that we have adequately funded and accessible services for our Aboriginal individuals here in Nelson. I'm going to ask Erica Scott to take it over from here.
Thanks, Shalina. So we want to talk about the evidence supporting this redirection of funds. In our research, we found a lot of studies that show that the prevention of crime is cheaper and more effective than responding to crime. Here in Nelson, we have Nelson Street Outreach that has reported that its services have reduced crime. And in Eugene, Oregon, they have a program since 1989 called CAHOOTS, which stands for Crisis Assistance Helping Out in the Streets. And their members get 500 hours of training in to make it so that to make them able to respond to all kinds of crises that are nonviolent, including sexual assaults. Not to say that they're not violent. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. So, but in 2019, of 24,000 calls, they only requested police backup 150 times. So they were able to divert a lot of crisis calls from the police. And they have saved the city a lot of money. They have approximately $22.5 million annually. So in closer to home in Canada, many municipalities are looking at these same kind of redirections of funds. And in Calgary, Vancouver, and White Rock, they're looking at moving money from the police to crisis and outreach services in much the same way that we're proposing. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we can look close to home for models. So we'd like to respond to possible criticisms of our proposal that we anticipate. Policing advocates may warn that the safety of citizens will be in danger if we cut police funding. But as in the example of CAHOOTS that has been going on for decades, you can see that this kind of program actually increases safety by reducing the workload of officers so that they can focus on other priorities, and by providing more appropriate response to many crises. Critics may also say that we can't ask police departments to change their service delivery models overnight, but that's not what we're asking. We are asking Nelson City Council to put together a data and evidence-driven plan to make these changes in the most efficient and timely manner possible. Critics may also mention that the province is currently reviewing the Police Act, and we should wait to see what changes they come up with. But we say that we've waited long enough. It's time for real change. The world is changing. Many municipalities are making this change, and we'd like to see Nelson be at the forefront rather than lagging behind. And you as Nelson City Council have the power and the mandate to bring about this change in our community. Some could say that most of these organizations are not funded municipally, so we can't fund them locally. But we propose that Nelson City Council, like other municipalities, can choose to augment funding to these organizations. And at the same time, you can also advocate for increases in the provincial and or federal funding. And I'll pass it on now to our colleague.
You have about 30 seconds left for the balance of your presentation.
Thank you, Selena and Erica. I just want to summarize the presentation by offering an invitation to the City of Nelson, and there's basically dividing this into 3 points. We invite the City of Nelson to join with its citizens to commit to studying this issue and develop a plan to redefine what security and safety looks like and the role of the police. We invite the City of Nelson to identify organizations and community groups that are underfunded and overextended. And finally, we invite the City of Nelson to look at funding directly and committing to facilitate increased funding sources to those organizations that are more appropriately able to function at full capacity and effectively to provide community-led solutions. thank you so much for this opportunity to offer this invitation for the citizens of Nelson and the Nelson City Council to be part of an exciting future in reimagining safe communities.
Thank you very much. Any questions from council? Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. Really, really interesting. I feel like from the presentation before and this presentation, there's kind of like movement happening. There's sort of this, we need to shift some priorities. But what I was wondering was, you know, we're a small town and we have a limited budget. And we have a lot of pieces that we have to keep going with that limited budget. Do you think that do you feel like the answer is locally funded, provincially funded, federally funded, a combination? Like, where do you think that money would come from? Because we're talking about wanting to get good people on the front line, well paid, well protected, and with support. So that's a pretty large system, and that has to be funded. So what kind of combination of funding do you feel like would get us there?
Thanks, Jesse, for that question. I'd have to say we'd have to defer to the expertise of the provincial and the federal and municipalities. But from what we understand of what's happening municipally, we know that you, as the council, have a certain degree of control of how you allocate your budget. We know that a percentage of what the police does, and as far as my research, it's probably up to 20% of what they do is responding to social and mental health related calls. If one was to use simple math, 20% of 3 million is 600,000, I think, if I do that fast enough. There might be that much available to at least look into which other organizations could provide a more appropriate care to the individuals that need it. However, you're right, that's more than likely not enough to give a sustainable long-term solution for the mental health and social services. We're also speaking with our provincial counterparts. I saw Brittany on the call and others. We've spoken to Interior Health, and we'll continue to speak to others because we do believe it's exactly what you said, that there needs to be a concerted effort of municipal working together with provincial and federal funds to have the best option for the population. It's just what exists now is not what's best for the population, where law enforcement is responsible for the mental health well-being of our population.
Much. I just feel like there definitely has to be this really connective line between municipal, provincial, and federal to get that sustainable long-term effort. So thank you very much.
Councillor Anderson and Councillor Lockenberg.
Yeah, thank you all for your presentation. And really what I think that you've shown us today is what I think is going to end up being the future of sort of mental health and policing, and that, you know, we know that it's inappropriate when we have police officers responding to mental health calls, but we don't have enough support for those mental health calls in another capacity. And so I do think that it's going to take time to get us there, but I definitely, I think that is going to be the future, and that we're going to see, it's not in any capacity defunding the police. I think it's allocating resources more appropriately so that the appropriate people with the appropriate backgrounds are responding to these situations. And I also think potentially, you know, maybe in the future, what is required, you know, when you look into what requirement to be like a mental health worker, a nurses versus an RCMP. I mean, those are different levels of education and different levels of training. And I think, you know, maybe a more holistic approach moving forward would be of benefit to the community at large. So I just, I thank you for that. Thanks for sharing that with us.
So I can, may I respond?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So I think that's fantastic, and I do, and I think one of our slides did mention that, you know, this is an evidence-based long-term change, but this change has to start somewhere, right? So we as this community have to decide that we can start that change by reallocating resources. Exactly. It's not defunding, it's reallocating resources. The police don't like to do this either. They're not trained well in doing this. They're not good at it. There's fatalities that result. We just saw what happened with the UBC student in the Okanagan. They're not the most appropriate to respond to this, and we know that. And we as a society should have the courage to respond and make even these small changes that can be incremental so that we can have a solution in the future where the police are not at all involved in this kind of response.
Thank you. Councillor Lachtenberg.
Thanks everybody for your presentation. I think anytime a community group can come forward and share with council what they're working on, it's really helpful, and I really appreciate the time you take in your lives to work on something that you're really passionate about. So I want to thank you for that first. And I do want to offer some feedback on your presentation, maybe a small correction that'll help. And one of that is the power. You say in your presentation that City Council has the power and mandate to affect some of these changes. And one of your examples of that is the City of Vancouver and the two resolutions in particular that they passed. I'm not sure if you know this, but ultimately those resolutions, they basically go on to the police board, and the police board then makes a decision on whether they want to pay attention to it or not. The most that a council can do in British Columbia, and I think this might be true across Canada, is make recommendations. They have no authority over the police. And even the budget levels that are set are themselves subject to approval by the province. I mean, there's a certain tiny degree of flexibility in that, but mostly we can say one thing and then have it completely overruled. And that's what happened in Vancouver with those resolutions. The council put those forward, went to the police board, and then they make a decision on what to do with it after that. So just a little note of caution. If you're hoping to expect us to be able to do something, and it sounds like you think we have more authority than we might, there's only so much that we could possibly do. Not to say we can't do nothing, but I just wanted to offer that bit of feedback. But thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lachtenberg and Councillor Page.
Thank you, everyone, for the thoughts on the presentation and the presentation itself, and obviously a lot of really thoughtful work has gone into it. I think one of the things that strikes me just listening to the commentary around the table is, I think that's one of the key challenges, is going through the existing system or looking to the existing system, i.e. the police board, to be the enactor or source of the change. And while that is a big part of the problem solving, as we kind of separate out the people that are struggling emotionally, mentally, sensory, the way they experience the world, versus the people that we are prescriptively trying to constrain and punish for or catch, or the traditional roles of the police, is that when we start through the police board, we don't necessarily end up in the place that is that holistic approach to the whole community. And I think we've all gotten the emails. We have all gotten the emails from various residents about situations they have, and they're very clearly require a different skill set brought to the table in terms of how those situations are mitigated and how healing is brought to the perpetrators of those problems. And so I appreciate that this needs to start somewhere, and I look forward to having more of a conversation as this goes forward. So for now, I really appreciate bringing it to us and the work you guys have put into it.
Thank you. Thank you. A couple of things I just wanted to add to Councillor Lachtenberg, what he mentioned earlier. So a couple of things that have happened in the last number of years in Nelson, in my previous term as mayor, and through the last council as well, we advocated for mental health assistance to police officers in certain situations, and we believe that model would work quite well in our community. Randy, you're well aware of restorative justice program that we have at the police, in our police force. But there's a couple of things that I struggle with, to be honest with you, in this ongoing pressure that's been put on policing, that's the only option for a cure, that we defund the police and somehow magically we'll cure this situation. We've noticed in recent news reports, as an example, I'm not sure what hospital it was, where the nurses and doctors had a lottery going on how drunk a certain person was in a bed, and that they weren't police officers, by the way. So I'm just wondering what work is being done with other organizations to see if there's funds available there. That's one area. In healthcare alone, there may be some opportunities there. And I also wanted to let you know that at the end of the day, we did have a review here a few years ago around our police budget, and in actual fact, that has to go to the province, and the province eventually rules on what's appropriate allocation for our population, crime indexes, etc. And we ended up in a situation where we were actually 2 police officers short for the work that we had to do. And last but not least is in your report, you seem to think that if we took away the mental health calls from police, that somehow it would free them up to do other things. But that doesn't reduce the budget. That just allocates that officer to a different area. So for us to reallocate budget from policing is a whole different situation. There again, that's a download from the senior levels of government, such as the feds and the province, to be able to put that money forward, to put forward the resources the police need to support them in many of these cases, and vice versa. And again, I want to say that it's becoming really difficult for me personally, as chair of the police board, to feel as though we're the target of this particular initiative on an ongoing basis. And there's little or no talk about any other organizations anywhere in our province around this particular issue. And I happen to know from first-hand experience of being over since 1999 sitting in this chair, we have very good people policing our community, do good work every single day. And I can tell you it's getting tiring for those folks to be listening to the same pressure being put on them, that they're the only solution to curing this problem around mental health and addiction in our community, and clearing up what's presumed to be a problem within policing in our municipality.
May I respond, and then Randy and Erica, if you have something. So thank you very much, Mayor, for that those multiple questions and their points. And I have to say that we of course do not want to harm people and don't want them to feel targeted or bad. However, we are a citizen group that are here to represent the interests of the citizens. In terms of what we are doing, we're called the West Kootenay People for Racial Justice, but our hands are in multiple areas. As I may have just stated, I just had a meeting with Interior Health to discuss this very similar issue. We are speaking with our health authority colleagues to find out what we can do about racism in the healthcare system. You may have all read the In Plain Sight report, which is abhorrent about what is happening to our Indigenous population in the healthcare system in terms of the systemic racism that is experienced across the board. We are not exempt. I'm a healthcare professional myself. We are not exempt, and we know that system needs to be targeted. Not targeted, but addressed. In addition, we are addressing the education system, looking at systematic racism in the education system. We've had the SD8 has had a CME, continuing education event, where Desmond Cole and others came to share their experiences, and we're speaking about bringing EDI consultants into all of our areas of work. So of course we understand that these tentacles of racism are in all areas of our work. However, for the most part, in education and in health, people do not die as a result of racism. They are disadvantaged. They have poor health outcomes. They have poor education statuses. However, if there is a fatal encounter with a police officer because you are BIPOC, you may die. And we know that that's what happens with law enforcement. So why is it that we're focusing on law enforcement? That's one of the reasons, because our community members and those that are BIPOC have a disproportionate encounters with police, with the justice system, with incarceration, and with death. So for us to not keep this on our agenda would be would be not disingenuous toward the population who we wish to serve. So why do we bring this up? Because we know that this is one way to address the system. Take it away from the police who don't like it and are not good at it, and give it to someone else. We know that one way to address that is through the Nelson Police Board, through the Nelson City Council. We're also looking at other ways, but we cannot not address this just because it makes people feel uncomfortable. Frankly, these people who are in these situations feel uncomfortable all the time. You know, people who are on the streets, who are homeless, who have mental health crises, they're uncomfortable all the time. They're the people we should be the most concerned about. So I'd like to really advocate for them. Randy and Erica?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you.
I
So
did want
I just want to follow up with you, and I really don't want to carry
Mr.
this,
Mayor?
but yeah, Cal,
Mayor?
yeah, go ahead, yeah.
I think we're getting into debate here, and
Yeah,
that's not
exactly.
the purpose
So
of a town meeting.
exactly, and that's what I just wanted to say. I don't want to get into a debate on this, but I think there's opportunity for further discussion, and I'd really like to be able to have that opportunity to speak with you as chair of the police board directly, because I know I'm just letting you know that some people are struggling with this continuous issue that appears to be targeted towards defunding the police. It's not talking about defunding anybody else. It's talking about defunding the police. So I think maybe in the future we should talk about that a little bit. So thank you very much for your presentation, and take care.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Okay, up next, library.
Hello.
Oh, who have we got?
We've
Oh, we
got Tracy.
Okay. Yeah, I see
Yeah,
Tracy.
and we also have Annie, our board chair, with us this evening.
Thank
So there'll
you.
be both of us.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Thanks, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak to you tonight about our library. As we've just introduced ourselves, I also want to mention that, as you know, Councillor Page is our city rep, sits on our board as an equal member. As you know, the Nelson Public Library celebrated our centenary this year. 100 years ago, the mayor and council at that time had the foresight to establish the Nelson Municipal Library under the Provincial Library Act. And being a municipal library meant sustainable funding, support, and cemented the library as an important city service. We appreciate and thank you again for your continued support and your advocacy at UBCM. Fast forward 100 years, and the library continues to be supported by mayor, council, and city staff. Without your support, the library would not be that vital, busy, and well-loved institution it is today. We really appreciate, in the midst of this pandemic, the city supported the library and its staff in efforts to keep everyone working. Through policies and support from the Emergency Operations Center, the library staff and our online services remained available to residents, even while the library building was closed.
So one of the highlights of the year, as Annie mentioned, was our centenary. The community demonstrated their support through donations, ticket sales, and grants. And in total, we raised just under $30,000 to help support our celebrations. Our year-long celebration started in January with the Capitol Theatre event, where just over 300 people attended. And even amongst a global pandemic, we were able to organize the museum exhibit, publish a history book, create 2 videos celebrating the library, commission artwork, and explore the future of libraries with CBC Radio's Nora Young.
Of course, the major role of the board is to create the strategic directions of the library, which the chief librarian and the staff implement. We're going to be reviewing our strat plan next year, as 2021 will be the last year for this current plan. Right now, the 3 focus areas are in green, and you can see how they align with the city's priorities.
So I'll be sharing with you the activities and services the library offered in 2020, and how we quickly adjusted and adapted, responding to the needs of the community during the pandemic. Though the world was turned upside down, we continued to use the library's strategic plan to guide us and explore how our services intersect and assist with the city's priorities. So like the city, the library serves all, young and old, from all socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds. The library makes up part of the city's social infrastructure, foundational services that support the quality of life of a city. So at the library, in addition to providing resources like books and offering services like a story time or digital training, the library also provides space and a place where everyone is welcome and there's no charge to walk in the door. So people use the library to meet friends, to work individually or in groups, to collaborate, to discuss issues and create solutions. This year, the value of the library's physical space was made even more apparent. We heard from our members how the lack of public spaces to gather added to their angst and brought on by the pandemic. Lastly, one of the library's most important assets is the staff. Every day you'll find library staff guiding people through the maze of information to find resources, whether for personal or professional needs. We're there helping people with technology, improving the digital literacy skills of our community. And in March, 2 library staff members were redeployed and assigned to work in the Emergency Operations Center. Avi was helped as the deputy manager and Lindsay as the communication assistant. Also, Jen helped with the recovery plan, reaching out to local businesses. And we were happy to share our talented library staff with the city. So supporting community needs in the midst of a global pandemic created some challenges. Closing of the library building meant we couldn't deliver in-person services, and when we were allowed to reopen the building, the COVID safety protocols made the way we normally deliver those services really difficult. So our first step was to increase our online library collection of ebooks, audiobooks, and streaming video, providing more access to online reading and listening materials for residents. We focused on communicating to those residents, agencies, and businesses, making sure they knew that even if the building was closed, they had 24/7 access to the online library. So that also included online learning and professional development courses like lynda.com and Gale courses. Library staff were also available to answer questions and help people with technical questions, teaching people how to access online materials, how to set up a Facebook account, and guide people through the ins and outs of Zoom. Though our focus at this time was about reaching out to community, we also heard back from members about what our services meant to them. So one person shared this with us. Library services have been amazing during my isolation. I've downloaded ebooks and magazines, and it has such a major impact on my mental health. Thank you. So since March, staff have been continually adapting and transforming ways in which we fulfill our community needs. And to help us, we turn to online tools like YouTube, Facebook, Zoom, and Instagram. These are just some of the examples of how library staff adapted and stepped up to support our community. We developed tutorial videos on how to access the online library. We partnered with local agencies to offer workshops for parents. We promoted local businesses with our Let's Chat series. We delivered our popular summer reading club online. And we used FaceTime to connect with seniors at Mountain Lakes and Lakeview Village. We walked them down the aisle of books to show them what was available and talked to them about what books they liked reading. Then we packed up all those books in bags and delivered them to those residents. So here's a quote from a worker at Mountain Lake sharing the importance of the service. The staff at the Nelson Library make a strong effort to keep the seniors of our community and those living with challenges connected and able to continue to enjoy normalcy through offering access to library materials. So in May, we started reinstating some of our in-person services. We offered a takeout service for books, magazines, DVDs, audiobooks, and we also offered printing to go. Before COVID, we would see dozens of people daily using our public computers, our public printers to print resumes, mailing labels, online government forms. And if you didn't have a home printer last spring, we were one of the only places you could access printing services. And with the warmer weather, we moved some of our online programs outside to local parks. So here there's an image of our mother-daughter book club meeting outside. So yes, takeout was very popular. After a couple months of only accessing online materials, residents were excited to get their hands on physical books. And this is a cartoon that one of our members made and shared with us just to show their enthusiasm for us being able to offer some real physical books. And in fact, we packed up 760 bags containing 8,851 items that we loaned out over a 3-month period. So we know that libraries are more than just a warehouse of books. They're a community hub. They bring people together. And during the pandemic, library staff learned firsthand the integral role the library played in people's lives and its contribution to the community's social infrastructure. We learned about the importance of the human need to connect with others and how that combats the negative effects of social isolation and improves mental health. So how to accomplish this in the midst of a global pandemic created some challenges, but we were up for them. Staff turned their attention on making connections online with our members, groups, and community partner agencies. Though we reached many, we knew we were not connecting with everyone. There are many in our community that do not have access to a computer, the internet, or have the skills to go online. Pre-COVID, dozens of people would access the computers and Wi-Fi daily, and library staff would help people connect to the internet, access email, or find forms online. One way we were able to help reduce that digital divide was to increase our Wi-Fi strength to make it more accessible outside the library building. And it worked. We saw people in their cars or sitting outside the building accessing the Wi-Fi. This is a touching message we received that demonstrates the effects of our efforts. I'm a former library member. I used to come to the library when I was an international student in the Nelson area, and I really enjoyed it. Right now, I'm in Italy, my home country, and receiving your newsletters cheer me up. I find it really important that you continue your activities even during this challenging time. Here in Italy, we are almost 2 months into lockdown, and I can assure you that reading really helps. I wanted you to know that I think all the work you are doing is really helpful for the community. I found it awesome that you give online courses too. So we responded to global issues as well about race, discrimination, reconciliation by supporting conversations and getting people resources they needed to help explore those topics. We reached out to parents and welcomed them to online story time. And for Zoom newbies, we offered online tutorials to help them be part of this online community and discussion. When making plans to reopen the library building, we wanted people to feel welcomed and that they were returning to a familiar place. And we had lots of challenges doing that, but staff were creative and determined to make it as welcoming as possible while adhering to the safety guidelines and other orders from WorkSafe, the Provincial Health Office, and of course the city policies as well. We created a video to let people know what had changed and what to expect. We used positive messaging and reconfigured the layout to make it easier to browse and help people find what they wanted. Many of the changes that we made will probably continue to use long past COVID, just because they've been so popular. So sustainability. Our key objectives with this priority are ensuring our programs and services are delivered efficiently and effectively, that we communicate about our value, that the board focuses on governance and advocacy, and that we also are conscious of our environmental footprint. So how did we accomplish this during a pandemic? Our primary focus was on safety for staff and patrons. Staff were consulted in the development of our safety plan and procedures. We knew communication was key to ensure a smooth transition and welcoming back people to the library building. Services were reinstated over several months, and each time a new provincial health order was rescinded or introduced, we adjusted accordingly. This took time, creativity, and teamwork, and I received support from my provincial colleagues as we met weekly to discuss WorkSafe and provincial health orders to determine how to implement them in a library setting. I also met with Annie, our board chair, weekly to discuss these challenges. We partnered with other organizations to deliver online programs jointly to reach a broader audience and to support staff by sharing the workload. Nelson Public Library staff are leaders in the region in doing this, developing ideas, seeking funding, creating procedures, marketing, and facilitating joint online programming. Now, we have lots of partners who supported our efforts this last year, regionally and provincially. These associations supported library staff and board with training, and for our patrons, access to a variety of digital resources that we couldn't afford if we weren't part of that consortium. Through an advocacy effort in 2019, 20 million in 2020, public libraries in BC received a one-time tech grant. Though it wasn't the sustained funding increase that we were looking for provincially, we felt like it was a start, and campaigns are underway for 2021.
The board this year consists of 11 trustees, and we're recruiting a resident from Area E to join the board in a non-voting capacity, who will be key, I think, in advocating and expanding and supporting services in Area E. Our board also rose to the challenge of meeting online. Not easy when trustees were also juggling work, families, and other commitments, often online as well. And when we realized we were unable to meet with our stakeholders face to face, we prioritized our annual goals and moved forward, keeping an eye on the big picture. Paramount on our priority was supporting our Tracy, as chief librarian, and her staff, who were creatively, as you've just heard, pivoting when the pandemic hit. And I really want to acknowledge at this time the work of our Centenary Committee, which consisted of community members, staff, and board members for switching gears midstream to plan the successful celebrations to honor our 100th anniversary, and also to the Friends of the Library who continue to support us. So to better focus on the library's 3 key strategic directions, we restructured committees. We merged our advocacy and fundraising work to a fund development model. We recognize that all our trustees have an advocacy role, and we're looking forward to meeting with our new MLA, congratulations, Councillor Anderson, to continue to advocate for sustainable provincial funding. BC Libraries are now part of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, so we're even more connected with the city under that same umbrella. Recently, we updated our advocacy roadmap and our stakeholder map. We recognize relationship building is key to sustaining our library resources. These relationships are important as they are our champions and allies in our communities and elsewhere. This was apparent when we reached out for letters of support for the proposed new facility project grant application. We quickly received 12 letters from organizations within the arts, tech, social services, and education and training sectors.
Sorry, I'll start again. I'll just turn to some library trends. Here you'll see people are still coming to libraries, but they're using it differently. It's no longer a place of transactional services, checking out a book, but nowadays the dynamics of the library has changed by adding a relational side to all its processes. Libraries are shifting from focusing on transactional services and have become relational, which creates more value for the users. One item I'd just like to point out here is though we do see a slight decrease in visits in 2019, I believe that was due to the surge of visits we saw in 2018 during the wildfire season, when many people came to the library to escape the smoke and heat. So too, though, 2020 is not so much of a normal year, I thought it was important that we looked at some of the statistics as well. So even though we were open 65% less hours than 2019, our circulation was only down by 48%. Events are 30% less, but the actual numbers for 2020 are pretty impressive. We hosted close to 300 events in the library, or 300 events, and the majority of those were online. Online resources, this increase is no surprise. I believe that trend will continue now that more people were introduced to online books during the pandemic, and we've adjusted our budget to reflect that trend. And since the library reopened, the building reopened in late July, we're seeing our numbers increase monthly, including that of patron registration, visits, and the number of items borrowed. Membership. So this graph just shows you how our members are divided up, but in total, all our library membership represent 54% of the combined population of these areas. On to our provisional budget 2021. So this budget was developed with a number of assumptions. In 2021, we're assuming we'll continue with reduced open hours, which has a direct correlation with income and expenses. On the income side, with less open hours, there's less opportunity for printing and merchandise sales. On the expense side, there's less staffing needed to backfill for vacations and sick time, and staffing makes up 75% of our budget. If open hours do end up increasing, the assumption is that revenues and expenses will also increase in line with that. So just quickly looking at the income side, I'll just speak to some of the line items with major differences from 2020. So our operating income, as explained in the assumptions, this line item includes fines and membership fees, printing, transit pass commissions, and really less hours equals less sales. Donations and fundraising, there's a decrease in this line item, taking into account that the Friends of the Library will not be able to hold book sales, as they weren't this year either, and that counts for much of this revenue stream. So that leaves our provisional budget showing a decrease of 1% over our 2020 budget. So expenses, our salaries and benefits, we just kept that at 0 as per the assumptions, reduced staff wages due to reduced hours and the need for vacation and sick coverage. Library management, this is down by 16%, and we are able to do that just because of reducing our staff training budget. And that doesn't mean that staff won't have training opportunities. What it is accounting for is just there won't be any travel expenses in 2021. So that's saved us some funds there. And also a big part of our 2020 budget there was our merchandise for our centenary, which we won't be purchasing in 2021. Programs, we've reduced that as well. And primarily that has to do with continuing to provide online programming. We found some savings there. In 2019, the library received approximately $80,000 through a CBT Tech Hub grant. This summer, 2 rooms in the library were transformed into digitization, recording, and editing stations. These rooms will be available to the public to record videos, podcasts, music, and they'll be able to edit them using our editing station with a complete Adobe Creative Cloud system. The digitization equipment can digitize vinyl albums, VHS tapes, mini DVDs, scan slides, and other images.
And while we're very proud of our existing library, we're all extremely excited about the possibility of a new facility, which will lead us into the next 100 years. Combined with the outdoor plaza, it really will be a showcase for our city. The plan speaks to the feedback that our community has given us in recent surveys. Nelson's increasing population has changing needs. 60% of our respondents wanted to see more public spaces for meetings and to hang out. This isn't possible in the current location. And the proposed library's flexible configuration will allow increased use for community organizations after hours as well. We look forward to creating a gathering place with First Nations and Métis communities. These consultations and library programming will help us address UNDRIP and commit to the truth and reconciliation calls to action. Finally, as a key component of a larger urban plan, we're proud that this grant-funded project will stimulate the economy during and after the pandemic. Our library is destined, we think, to make Nelson even better. Thanks for your time, and happy to take any questions that you may have of Tracy or myself.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions? Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor, for the presentation. Just looking at this picture of the new library, it's just beautiful. My question to you is, as staff in a library has had to shift with COVID, I'm wondering just how that experience has been within your staff and, moving forward. I mean, do you feel like there's been an ability to adjust to what seems like a real shift kind of in what traditional libraries looked like, much more digital realm? I'm just wondering how that's playing out.
Sure. Thanks, Jesse. I think there's two stories to your question. For sure, yes, we are seeing an increase in our digital collection and our online programming, and we've learned a lot from it. How to make it better, what people want to experience. And I think when the pandemic first started in March and April, and we knew this was going to be the reality for us for some time, we wanted to make sure the programming and some of the services we were introducing would be sustainable, so that they would take us even past COVID. And I think we did a good job at that. I can see a lot of our online programming continuing to take place after COVID. Some online book clubs are much easier to get participation on a cold, snowy evening when you just have to connect to Zoom rather than get in your car and come down to the library. But on the other side of the story is what we saw when we started offering a takeout service and access to physical books, how people were so thrilled about that and thrilled about the idea of being able after that to come into the library and browse themselves to find what they needed. And again, this new facility here speaks to the need of those public spaces in our community for people to come and gather. And so I don't think that will change, and staff know that, like I mentioned in our presentation firsthand, how important that is. So I hope that answers your question, Jesse.
Thank you. I mean, it's like, because the library is shifting, staff must have to shift with that. So it's kind of a new way of being staff in a library. It's an interesting journey.
Yeah. You know what? We help people access information, and we can do that in person or online with a physical book or with an online resource. So it has shifted, but the fundamentals, I think, are the same.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Woodward. Anybody else? I don't see any other hands up. So thank you both very much for your presentation. We really appreciate it. And thanks for all your good work during COVID.
You're welcome.
It's amazing. It's amazing that you were able to hang in there, to be honest with you.
They did well.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you for the time.
You're welcome.
Keith?
Sorry?
Hey, John, I wonder, just a point of procedure to the previous, of the library, thank you very much. We had a letter from the Racial Justice Group, and I wonder, before we powered past an opportunity to potentially discuss referring that to a business meeting. So before we move on to the next section, I wonder if we can have that discussion.
Okay, so we're finished with the library piece, is what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
I have nothing to add to Annie and Tracy's
Yeah.
great explanation of what's going on over there.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
and I have no questions.
Okay, thanks very much. So onward and upward. Councillor Page, go ahead.
Yeah, no, we had a letter of request off of the racial justice presentation, and I'm just wondering if we might refer that to a future business meeting. I would make that motion. I'm moving to refer to a future business meeting.
Thank you. Second by Councillor Anderson. Is that right? I think I've seen your hand go up. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Questions or comments?
And I guess just for staff at some point, what you would like us to do with that, explore what they're, yeah, we just need some direction, what you'd want us to do with that.
Yeah, I think that's the discussion we would have at a future business meeting. Like the request here is that we ask Nelson City Council to commit to studying this issue on a local level, and with the information gathered through this process, create a plan to review and reposition the responsibilities of our local police department, the roles they should and should not play in community services, and make recommendations of and financial commitments to other local organizations that should respond to specific situations first. So I think we would have that sent to staff, and then a report would be brought on whether or not that was something we could do, whether we could take on that planning process or not, and then a decision would be made. So I'm not prepared to answer the questions before we actually have the discussion, but we have this request, and so I would refer it to a future business meeting so that we may have a discussion on whether or not this is something we want to take on.
Councillor Woodward.
So I think I really feel like that group was trying to relieve pressures off of the police. More than anything else, they just want the allocation of police time to be properly directed, and that they're not dealing with what we see on the street culture that we see, which does, has many issues and causes many issues here in Nelson. So I'm just thinking, I feel like what they were just trying to get at, the Colonel, was just, what best way can we support the police to do the work that they're trained to do, and have the people that are actually trained for mental health be attending to people who need it. So I think that I want to get rid of the defund the police thing. I don't think they're asking that. They're just trying to see if we can have a better organized system.
Yeah, so I think on that note, Councillor Woodward, the idea at this point in time from Councillor Page would be to have that referred to the next business meeting for that discussion. And at that point in time, then we'd have to see, where does all this fall? Do we have the capacity to deal with it? Is this the right place to have it, etc.? So does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
He's asked for a future meeting. I don't think that we have a number of things with budget right now that I think we need to be considerate of our staff's time.
Right.
So I'm hearing you, Mr. Mayor, say the next business meeting, but I'm thinking that that's putting a lot of pressure on staff over the Christmas holiday, that they're going to have a fully fleshed out report of this nature done by the time that Christmas is over.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were asking for it to be on the next agenda so a future meeting. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Sorry, I didn't realize that. Yeah. Any further comments? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, carried. Thank you. Okay, onward and upward. Thanks, Councillor Page. Thanks, everybody. I think we're done. Councillor reports of any kind? Oh, Councillor Anderson, this is your last meeting. Sorry.
Yeah, I was really hoping to be there for Nelson Next, which I believe is going to be hopefully adopted on Friday, but I did announce last week that this would be my last meeting. And after talking with a few of you, I think that I am ready to resign and step down. And I have my letter all drafted for Sarah, but it has been absolutely wonderful to work with all of you, all of the councillors, mayor, and staff. And I've just really appreciated the opportunity and the relationships I've built over these last 2 years.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that you got the 2 years under your belt, you know, at municipal level. And it was noticeable the other day when we were speaking with the minister. Kind of wished we'd have had you on the call actually. She was the mayor of Tofino at one time, and you can tell right away in the conversation that she's connected to the, you know, being a municipal member of council and as mayor, that she understands the municipal profile and the needs. So, you know, Brittany, when you go to Victoria, that's going to be a real benefit to you when these issues come up from the municipality, because really, I know you've heard this in the past. We've all said it, that, you know, this level of government is the nearest to the people, with all due respects, but it really is. You know, we hear from, you know, the people on the ground every day of the week. So, but, you know, honest to God, thank you very much. And, you know, look at what happened. You put your name forward in the last election, and here you are today, moving on to hopefully bigger things. And we're so proud of you, to be honest with you. We're very proud of you, and glad that this was your stepping stone to move forward. So thanks so much, Brittany. And we look forward to staying in touch with you. Remember that. And you know what?
John, you have my cell phone number. I expect to hear from you.
Well, that'll probably change. But, you know, last night I was thinking that actually it's easier to stay in touch with you now with Zoom. You know, in the meeting with Minister Osborne the other day, we had elected officials from all over Southeast BC on the call. That just doesn't happen in those one-on-ones at the UBCM. You know, you got your 10 minutes of fame and you're booted out the door, and you know, sometimes you get some traction, and the neat thing about those calls, and I hope you bring this to Victoria, is that you get a feeling for how everybody else is feeling as well. You know, it's not just a one-off from Nelson or Salmo or Revelstoke or whatever. So I would suggest you try and keep that up if you can, that Zoom. And we'd love to be part of one. If you want to put them together on a quarterly basis or something like that, it'd be awesome. So good luck.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Council. Thanks, staff.
Thanks,
community.
We're gonna miss you. We're gonna miss your like feistiness. You really brought this kind of feisty energy.
Yeah.
That was directed and focused, and I learned a lot.
Not all the time we aren't.
I was gonna say not everyone's gonna miss that.
All right,
But,
the motion to adjourn. Councilor Morrison, did you? Sorry, Councilor Moore.
No, sorry, I just had a couple of things that I just wanted to talk about from the Regional District Board.
Oh, okay, thank you, yeah.
Just that we're moving into the budget, and I think it's going to be, hopefully everybody's going to come with sharp pencils as we move into the next month or so of seeing budgets. Tomorrow we'll be looking at the recreational budget for 2021, so that'll be an interesting discussion. I just want to say that at the last regional district meeting, we did some appointments, and I just want to let everybody know that I've been appointed to the Municipal Finance Association to represent the RDCK, and hopefully I'll be able to get a position as a trustee at their election in March. I was also elected to serve on the Kootenay Timber Supply Area Coalition, an area of which I've had great interest in terms of forestry for a number of years. And we're still waiting, and I'll do wink, wink, nudge, nudge at now MLA Anderson, that we're still waiting for the CBT appointment to come, because I was, as a matter of fact, Councillor Anderson nominated me when she was the Regional District Director to be a potential candidate for this appointment. So waiting still to hear regarding that appointment. This year, the RDCK didn't have their Christmas luncheon, and the money that would normally have been spent on that, the decision was made by the regional district directors to share that money with food banks in the area. So a number of food banks throughout the regional district received some money from the regional district. And on a sort of more local city note, I just want to remind anybody that's listening that the youth center, that lovely youth center tree is outside of City Hall, and it's a great photo opportunity. I went down there and took a photograph, and I would encourage anybody to go down and have a walk outside there. It's a lovely tree, and it does make for a really super picture for this Christmas holiday.
Is that the one that had
What's
the
the hashtag?
owl in it?
Yeah, the
Awesome.
one that's outside of City Hall there. Yeah, that was donated to the youth center. So,
Thank you.
anyways, that's about all I have to report at this time.
Thanks very much, Janice. Keith?
I'll just go over, it's actually looking over since even just our last meeting, there's been quite a lot of meetings, and I know I've seen you, John, and my colleagues at a number of them. So I'll just go over a little sequentially. So at the Association of Kootenay Boundary Local Government, where we've been working on a number of committees around convention and nomination. So with the election of Raleigh over in the Kootenay Boundary area to his MLA position, there was an opening up on the board. So that nomination cycle closes today, and we'll be meeting tomorrow to see what applications were received. We were also figuring out the convention information stuff in terms of resolution meetings and whether or not to try and figure out a convention for radium for 2021. And those discussions are still ongoing as we kind of collect survey data from the membership. As we continue on through, we had utilities budget discussions, which those meetings I think are posted online, but there was lots of good discussion around the water use, water saving, ICI media, and everybody's aware of that. Last week, I also, as the delegate from the AKBLG, was appointed to the Economic Recovery Core Leadership Team, and so that team met, and problem areas that were identified were that there's a lot of best practices going on in the area from the Economic Practitioners Network, but there isn't quite the capacity or mentorship to the people who are looking for support and access to enact and execute best practices, to find the mentorship networks and the leadership capacity to take on those new learnings, because everybody with COVID is, as we all know, just at 110, 120% for a sustained period of time. It was also pointed out how much the arts and culture has been affected, and so one of our local people around town, Sydney Black, has been also put onto that team, and so we're carrying on discussions there on a regional basis on how we can support the economic recovery. We also, this last week, had the NAADP quarterly advisory meeting where we were adopting the short-term strategic priorities. I believe they're coming in coming weeks to present what the work has been done there. And big pieces that were standing out, we had an excellent presentation from our staff around the housing component and the needs assessment, where I have some notes here of highlighting that 7.9% of our residents are experiencing some level of energy poverty, meaning that they're making choices between their bills and their rent for the utilities, but that this is not as bad as it is in the surrounding area. We're actually one of the lowest between E and F is the city of Nelson itself. And again, that area, that board, that table, the NAADP is identifying arts and culture as being one of those heavily impacted areas. And so there are some specific strategic priorities around supporting that. And then finally, there's been some work being carried on over at the Coordinated Access Systems table, which is an initiative kicked off by the Nelson Committee on Homelessness around making sure that the organizations supporting housing are working from one list in order to prioritize and coordinate the access to housing based on need, and making sure that our housing population is as small effectively as possible, hopefully effectively zero. So we had an additional meeting over the week where a memorandum of understanding that has been developed over the course of the year was presented in a draft form. There's a few revision cycles, I'm sure, until that gets adopted, but all around good work. And then finally, We had a meeting not only this, it feels like days ago, but it was this morning from the Fortis Energy Pathways Study. So we received a presentation from Fortis, and John Mayor Dooley was there, and Councillor Morrison was there, and we discussed or heard from Fortis on how they see the two different pathways of full electrification or diversified fuel types going, and the research and consulting they've done to arrive at those conclusions, which is all very interesting to understand where Fortis's position is as it moves forward towards its targets. And so that was all I had in that last couple days.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? You had two finalies in there, Keith, by the way. Councillor Woodward.
I know you all want to go. I just want to quickly say I was on the Nelson Committee on Homeless table, and they are with a warming center up and going, and a lot of pieces have fallen into place. So things are actually looking quite positive. There's no one living at that government road muddy encampment thing, which is good. So they're being taken care of. And also really good news, it was reported that Castlegar Trail and Grand Forks have all stepped up and are developing warming centers for themselves, some spare beds. Like, they're actually doing enough that the pressure here on Nelson's been relieved a fair amount, which is really, really positive. So those towns all stepped up because of COVID and the pressures that were on us, and we were feeling early on. I think Nelson was it was like too much. There was too much pressure on Nelson, so they've actually it's spread out now. So from that last meeting, it looked like things in that field we're doing fairly well, which is good.
And Jesse, I think council should take credit for that. The letters that you wrote to those other councils, asking them to step up, and
yes,
I think that made a difference.
I think absolutely. I think there was a really clear indication of where things were at, and those other towns did step up. So good job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Woodward. Anybody else? Hearing none. Motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Renwick and Councillor Anderson. All in favor? Opposed? Oh, it fails.
Merry Christmas, everybody out there.
Merry Christmas.
Brittany never resigned.
We're going to see you on the 18th.
Yeah.
See you Friday. I mean, for people who watch the regular meetings, so.
Don't forget to wear your mask. Thanks, Sarah.